Welcome to the Math Ed Podcast. My name is Sam Otten from the University of Missouri, and my guest today is Nicole Joseph, who's from Vanderbilt University. Nicole, thanks so much for being here.
Yes, thanks so much for having me, Sam.
I'm looking forward to the conversation. We have a new article that came out recently in the journal Urban Education, and so we're going to focus most of our conversation about that. The article's called Conceptualizing Intersectional Harm in Mathematics Classrooms, an analysis of high school black girls' experiences. And that's written with Ashley Ann Douglas and Mariah Harmon. And so, Nicole, before we lead up to that article, though, I want to just get a little bit of background information because it's your first time on the podcast, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So, first of all, where did you do your graduate studies and who did you work with back then? And I know we could talk about this a lot longer, but I also wonder if you could just summarize really quickly like what your dissertation was about back in grad school.
Yeah, so I went to the University of Washington, Seattle campus, beautiful campus. And my chair was actually James Banks, who, is like the father of multicultural education. But my committee was made up of Lonnie Horn, Nancy Beatty, who was actually a historian because I had a chapter in my dissertation that basically brought in the history of math education of Blacks to kind of give a broader context.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had Virginia Warfield, who was an actual mathematician from the math department that had done a lot of community work in Seattle, like in the 50s and 60s. In fact, my brother-in-law participated in one of her math programs where he was tutoring at Garfield High School. So
Wow.
she had some really interesting insights. So while she was a practicing mathematician, education was really a big thing for her. So I took a class from her and loved her and asked her to be on my committee. So those were the folks that were on the committee. And then I did a mixed method study. So I did some qualitative interviews and some surveys of high school Black students. At this time, I didn't have a focus specifically on girls. It was just Black students, period.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to understand, like, what are those factors that contribute to successful math achievement, and I'm just getting started at the time, and thinking about, what is achievement in math. And I wanted to look at in-school factors, but also outside of school factors. And some of those things were like teacher relationships, like the things that we kind of still already know. And those things I just found still impacted, Black students' math identities, college going. I really found things that kind of were already in the literature. And I've just had an opportunity now to kind of dive in and think more closely about the gender intersections of Black girls. So,
Yeah. But also bringing out those stories, and each time you hear the stories from new individuals, like treating them as individuals, and they're from a different part of the country, they're from a different,
yeah.
Now it's the 2000s, now it's the 2010s, now it's the 2020s. Bringing those stories forth is, I think, important every time, even if some of the themes are consistent over history.
Absolutely.
Your work has now progressed where you've been digging into this for years now, and
Yeah.
Black student experiences, Black girls experiences. You've done school level stuff. You've also gone into higher ed, like how some of the experiences go to higher ed,
Yep.
and sometimes it even goes beyond math. But this article is looking at their math experiences in particular.
Yeah.
But help us situate this urban education article, the one that we're going to talk about mainly. But help us situate that article and how it fits in with your broader research that you've been doing over those years.
Yeah. So this will probably cross some, one of your other questions, but this was an opportunity. I have a colleague at Vanderbilt that was engaged in a longitudinal study with low-income African-American students, and there were like 900 and something kids in this data set, and we were building a relationship. This is the early years at Vanderbilt, and she was telling me about the story. She invited me to be on their advisory board. So in the midst of that, conversation, I said, hey, do you have data on Black girls, And she said, yes. And, basically the rest is history. That's where the data set, comes from. And I was interested because they were also thinking about like math identities for African-American children. And so it fit with my research interests, which, to the day I die, I'm trying to better understand what are the, interpersonal, micro, macro, meso factors, that both hinder Black girls' ability to develop math identities, strong math identities, but also enfranchise that help them, develop strong math identities. And I care about math identities so much because, as you know, people like Joe Bowler have talked about the importance of math identities being persistent. People stay in math longer when they feel like they can relate and have a good relationship with math.
And they also, the flip side of it is they might want out of math as quick as legally possible. If they're
If they
if they are
don't,
not identifying with it, if it's not going well, they're like, how soon can I get out of this?
yeah. Math identities are, as Danny Martin would suggest, they're dynamic. Well, there's more people that suggest this as well. It's just I lean a lot because he focuses on Black students. Math identities are dynamic. They can change over time. Myself, I didn't feel like I had a strong math identity when it came to like geometry or more of the courses that I took that had more proofs. Speaking of proofs, Sam, that's some of
Yep,
your
yep, one
area.
of my areas. But yeah, it's fraught.
It just felt so hard. But the algebraic type of courses, trig and algebra 2, I just felt like powerful and strong. And I don't know, I think I was able to really understand algorithms and, how to do that thing. I'm not saying that the pedagogy was amazing inquiry based because it wasn't, but I was able to learn how to, do school and learn math in the ways that they were doing it. But I felt like I had stronger math identities when it was more algebraic.
Mhm.
So identities are very important.
And so bringing all those ideas and that kind of theoretical apparatus to this data set, would you say you kind of just wanted to take a look at some of the similar ideas, but with these 48 Black girls from this data set? Or were you kind of looking to see new insight? Like, was it confirming some of the things you've already been thinking about, or was it to slice something and look for some new insights
I
at a
mean,
certain level?
honestly, both things,
Okay.
how when we code, we oftentimes go in with a theoretical perspective and idea, but we also try to let the data speak to us.
Hmm.
So I was doing the same thing. I wanted to let that data and what those girls were saying bring to the forefront. And in fact, they were bringing things to the forefront that I had not seen published before,
Hmm.
specifically in a math classroom. So people have talked about, for example, Black girls being dismissed, for example, silenced, but they've talked about that in schooling experiences broadly.
Hmm.
So no one that I know of had really looked inside of the math classroom. And I would say it really built from my Harvard paper where I was talking about, we have to normalize Black girls' humanities in these spaces because they're dehumanized in a lot of ways in schooling experiences. And then I'm seeing that when you go look into the math classroom, some of those same things are showing up. But this paper allowed me to be able to actually name something, like to name the idea,
Hmm.
which was this discourse of dismissiveness and this discourse of dismissing their intellect.
Yeah, their intellectual lives almost in some
Yeah.
in some of the instances. And in this paper it is tied directly to mathematics experiences and you can hear the voices of the actual girls, because sometimes it also might be like there's some analysis of the systems of education and how it can marginalize people or groups.
Hmm.
But this one we're actually hearing from the girls saying this is how it felt when that happened and this was when I turned off because this happened.
Yeah.
So you're hearing it from themselves, not just kind of analyzing it from like an outside observer sort of thing.
That's right. And that's to me one of the powerful things about interviews or focus groups because it is their experience. It's their voices. And it just gives us, I think, a lot more insight. But one of the things that I actually had to like really labor with and tension with this paper was a lot of them had also sort of like, I think, internalized, oh, this is just how math is. Or, when I asked who's good at math, they also said like people who raise their hand, who raise their hand first or who don't have to use technology or a calculator, they can do the mental math quick.
Hmm.
So they had also like adopted a lot of those narratives that we already know that are just, not great, right? The other thing is that they weren't being very explicit about like racism or gender. And that was because, again, I was dealing with a secondary data set. I did not design those questions. Those questions were already designed. And these kids had been in this study for, good Lord, 10 years at this point because they started when they were kindergartners.
Hmm.
So that's why my theoretical framework had to take sort of this socio-political, like broader stance, and why I was essentially sort of theorizing taking what they're saying and theorizing that into this, social political context of what we already know
Mm-hmm.
about how girls experience learning and math. And so that was like just a tension around like the data that I had to work with. And, it turned out to be fine, but
Yeah.
I was like, they're not really actually saying, that this is racist.
Right.
But I can tell based off what we already know that this is very problematic,
And
right?
you're looking across multiple students. Like they're
And
just
I'm
talking about their
across
own.
multiple
They
students.
can't
That's
see the
right.
pattern that's happening with the other students as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you mentioned the secondary data analysis a little bit and the broader study, and people can find more details in the article. But anything else you want to say about the context of the data or the 48 black girls that end up like their narratives kind of become the centerpiece of this article? Any more context we need for that?
No, I mean, just again, that it was a longitudinal study. The larger study was a longitudinal study,
Hmm.
very powerful study. Several papers have been published off of this. It's kind of a first of its kind. I'm talking about the longitudinal study to have kids followed for that long, Black kids followed. And there were a few other students of color and a few white students, but the majority were African American kids. So I think just being able to hear their perspectives over time was really, really interesting. Interestingly enough, I'm also working on another paper that's an R&R right now. I won't say the journal, but this is the middle school. So when these kids were
Hmm.
in middle school, so
The urban education one is high school, and now you can actually hear from the same students, but rewinding back to when they were in middle school.
I can't say that they will be the exact same students, but some
Gotcha.
of them might be.
Okay, gotcha.
But they were the thing I want to say though is that they were in middle school when they did those, and these were more one-on-one interviews. So that's like another
Okay,
different
cool.
thing
All right,
too.
we already have a little teaser for the sequel that might be coming.
Hopefully,
So in the article, and I do hope people can read it because the voices come through on the text. But I want to pull out, just for the purpose of the podcast, I want to pull out to the two overarching themes.
hmm
So there's definitely a whole theme that's around how the black girls experience the relationships with their math teachers. And it is very much about that teacher and things that the teacher does and how the student feels about it. So I'm going to ask you about that. But the other main theme is the math learning opportunities themselves. Like what kind of curriculum, what kind of tasks, what kinds of work are they having to do with calling it math? So let's kind of hit on both of those. How did they describe the relationship with those teachers, and how did the care or maybe the lack of care, how did that get experienced by the black girls?
they describe these relationships as disconnected. That teachers didn't care. So when one of the girls would talk about how they would raise their hand and ask for help, that the teacher would come over, she would ask the question, the teacher would say something like, well, I've already done this, you should have been listening to what we were doing. And the girl might have said, well, I was listening. And the teacher might say, well, no, you weren't, and just look at the board and walk away. Now, somebody might argue and say, well, you know what? That actually, like, this is just how high school teachers are. Like, they all do that. And maybe they all do. But this is why intersectionality and context is really important, because the outcomes or the experiences can be different when you think about how race and gender are intersecting and impacting that particular experience, right? And so Black girls oftentimes, don't come from communities where there's a legacy of math teachers or math educators, or access to math tutoring and, you know what I mean? Like all of those types of resources. Oftentimes that's just not the case, at least from the studies and the girls that I have interviewed and connected with. But when they are not listened to, like, that's just not okay. And to walk away and ignore, those were some of the other things that, the girls, would talk about. So I think that that's really challenging when you don't see yourself as a math person or, as a strong math person or have a strong math identity. To have your teacher ignore you is not good. And teachers shouldn't ignore any student,
Hmm.
period.
Hmm.
But we know, again, that there are some students, Black girls included, where that relational piece is super important.
Yeah.
Teacher relationships are super important. The girls talked about how they wanted, when we asked one of them, what are you enjoying about math? One of them said something about the teacher. The teacher is really cool. She's funny. She connects with us. She asks about like how we're doing, things that are outside of the class. And I've heard that from other Black girls kind of like over and over. They want to, what I call vibe
Mm.
with their math teacher, which means that let's talk about math, but let's also talk about like outside things because I want to be connected to you.
Yeah, so that vibing and seeing people as humans and connecting outside is great, but then there's always I'm going back to what you were talking about earlier though about the not ignoring, and you were saying like don't ignore any of your students or don't brush them aside because that can really hit them hard. But I'm also thinking like that also means don't ignore any student, but also don't ever ignore a student. Because a teacher might think, well, I attend to them and I respond well 90% of the time, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe only 10% of the time I kind of brush it off or I kind of like push it aside. But when I was reading some of these girls' stories, it's like one time can stand out really strong,
Yeah.
and you can almost like lose a girl
Yeah.
by this one moment, and it's like that can stick with them. And maybe you can try to win them back. Maybe you can try to bring some of those other connections in and try to win them back. But it's like 90% of acknowledging them and building on their ideas and respecting them is not enough. It actually needs to be like pretty much 100% like respect and acknowledgement and listening and that sort of thing, which again just goes into the
Yeah.
as teaching.
Yeah.
This is the responsibility of teachers. It's like it's got to be every student. It's got to be every time. Like you got to be on your game.
I know, which is why teaching is hard. I mean, we're not gonna minimize that at all. It is
Yeah.
very, very challenging. I think particularly right now in like, the landscape that we're in, it's challenging.
Hmm. Or if a student says, you ignored me or you dismissed my idea pretty severely, it doesn't help for the teacher to say, well, 5 other times I listened to your idea. It doesn't
Right.
matter those 5 other times. It matters the one time you ignored it or dismissed it. That hurts the most. That
That's
stings the
right.
most.
That's exactly right, Sam. Yeah, it matters.
What about the learning opportunities that are kind of like maybe from the math curriculum or maybe it's just the kind of math activity? Tell us some stories.
So I did like a find, I put the word worksheet in and like it came up so many times in their stories. So the first thing that I just want to say is that there is nothing wrong with a worksheet in and of itself. But when a worksheet appears to be the main opportunity that students get to learn, that is a problem. And I was not in the classroom with these girls, but the way that they described it, it seems like worksheets were a very big part of their math learning experience. And so that was super problematic. They also talked about a curriculum, an online curriculum. I think it was called Delta or something like that. I wasn't familiar with it, but it may or may not have been like a way to practice, a particular concept. I'm not sure, but they talked about how they, were on this use Delta quite a bit.
Mhm.
So again, what that tells me is that there probably is not any ambitious teaching going on,
Mhm.
no type of like inquiry based learning, cool projects around mathematics. That's what that tells me.
Mhm.
Again, I want to let the audience know that I'm not against worksheets.
Mhm. And you need some practice. Yeah.
Yeah, of course, you do need some practice. And some math teachers, I'm sure, have learned how to use worksheets in very powerful ways where there is more of an opportunity to like share mathematical thinking or engaging with manipulatives.
Or do a few minutes on the worksheet, but then you actually use that to have a discussion and be like, hey, let's talk about number
Yes.
one and number four. How are they different? Or let's talk about what was the structure that happened across. Like
Yeah.
you could kind of prepare to bring out some ideas from the worksheet.
Yeah. But the way that they talked about it, that let me know. Plus, Jeannie Oakes has like, God rest her soul. I think she has passed away. She had 40 years, 30 years of research about tracking and the type of curriculum that is in like lower level math classes. And so, we know that that's the type of curriculum that is generally in these classrooms. And, many of the girls some of them were in quote unquote advanced math classrooms, but
Mhm.
many of them were also in quote unquote low level math classrooms or general or regular math classrooms. There's so many different labels nowadays.
Well, and to me, the key too, looking at the article, was to hear from the girls how they talk about the worksheets. I mean, some of them talk about it as like another worksheet. Is this all we're going to be
Right.
doing? And
Right.
it's this kind of sad thing where it's like they're not saying I'm having trouble with the worksheets or whatever. They're just saying, are we not going to do something a little bit more? Like
Yeah,
you write in the article about the kind of untapped intellect that they have, and they're not really being pushed to their full potential
that's
because
right.
and so it's also this kind of sad missed opportunity where it's like, oh, these girls maybe could have done more and wanted to do more, but
Yeah.
oh, just another worksheet. I'll crank it out,
Yep. That's exactly right.
which is kind of sad if you think about it for too long.
It is. It is. It is sad. And unfortunately, they're not an anomaly. I think this is what's going on across the country in most public schools in any major city, urban city. This is what it looks like, I'm
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah. And both of us also have talked about how difficult teaching is, and we also know that sometimes it's hard with classroom management and the teachers feeling like this worksheet will at least keep them occupied for a while they're looking at it.
Yeah.
I don't blame teachers for sort of going to that because it's working for them in certain ways, but then when we step back, it's like, yeah, but it's not working in other ways.
Right.
If we are missing out on the potential of the students' brilliance and they could have, pushed the envelope a little bit more,
Yeah.
it's tough. We're definitely not saying it's easy to fix, but we're
No, not at all. But I think this kind of goes into your other question about like what advice,
yeah.
would I, give.
Yeah, I was going to ask what advice you'd give to educators who are working with Black girls or just advice for teachers in general based on your work.
First of all, I want to read a quote from the paper. It says, the girls reported in their narratives that if only math teachers would do things like answer their questions, challenge them, slow the pacing, be open to making connections to talk about anything, and be caring, they would like, enjoy, and understand mathematics more.
Mm,
Now, again, it's the 48 girls. This is what they said would help them to see themselves more connected to math, changing attitudes about math, participating more in math if some of those things were done,
hmm
right? And I've always said in different talks and my writing, Black girls need more math, not less. And when I say more math, I don't mean like volume, I mean concepts. So it's like they need opportunities to, again, engage in ambitious math instruction. And I'm using that because most people right now in 2025 know what we mean by ambitious math instruction, inquiry. The mathematical practices, there are 8, right? Modeling with mathematics.
hmm
What were some of the
Critiquing
other ones?
reasoning, yeah.
Critique and
Look for
reasoning.
structure, yeah.
They need those opportunities to do that because they want to be challenged. Create opportunities for them to work on math projects. Now, I've been a math teacher, so I understand that, every week can't be, I mean, every semester or whatever can't be a math project. But even if they get to do one math project that is something that they care about,
Hmm.
That, of course, brings connection, relevance for them.
Hmm. Hmm.
And, it could be just about like interview a family member about their math experiences. What type of math did they enjoy when they were young in school, in the same grade that, your student is in? I mean, there's just so many things that we can do that I think the relational piece of mathematics needs to be in the presence just as much as, okay, we need to learn about integers. So those are a few things.
Yeah.
Getting to know the girls is really, really important. I think pacing, trying to use some level of differentiation. I know that can be challenging. I love formative assessments. I didn't write about formative assessments in this paper,
Hmm.
but engaging in formative assessments so that there's no penalty, right? You're trying to better understand what the kids know. And again, these are the formative assessment is again good for every student, but it seems to make a difference when you can have this communication with Black girls about what is it that you know, what is it, whatever concept you're working on, what is it that you know, what are you still struggling with, and giving them an opportunity to kind of co-create that conversation. I think helps them to be more connected to the math, but also like connected to the teacher
Mm.
because there's a level of care even in that, right? When you're trying to see, what students know and what students don't know.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot that I could say about
Yeah.
these relationships and how relationships are interconnected with learning mathematical concepts and ideas for Black girls.
Yeah, I think the care and the relationships washes over all of it, but it also connects like finding that right pace actually also shows care and shows that you have kind of a relationship of seeing the students and not just like blowing past them or something.
Mm-hmm.
And trying to challenge them also shows like I see where you are and I kind of trying to find that right level of challenge. And I actually see the challenge that they were asking for and the pacing that they're asking for. I see those as going together. Because challenge can actually mean stopping on a topic or an idea and going deeper into it.
Yeah,
So challenge doesn't always mean go faster.
that's right.
Challenge can actually mean like let's stop here and let's actually dig into this idea for a bit, let things come out. So it's actually a little bit of slowing down and going deeper can be the challenge.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think yeah, lots of great ideas you put in there. I'm sure listeners are making other connections too, but I
Yeah.
appreciate the advice.
Yeah. Let me just say one more thing because I want the readers to understand that I understand the complexities of schools. I have experienced using a scripted curriculum where the principal comes in your classroom and you have the chart on the wall and you're supposed to be chapter 15, lesson 5. Like, I understand all of those complexities. I would also say that Rochelle Gutierrez says that we have to figure out a way to engage in creative insubordination, where we are closing our doors and we are giving students opportunities to see themselves as strong math learners and doing whatever it takes in order to do that. And whatever it takes, I'm doing air quotes, you all, is going to be dependent on each and every individual kid.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to say that, Sam, because sometimes researchers are so like far from the classroom
Yeah.
that they kind of forget about what schools are like. And so, I spent 12 years in the classroom as a math teacher and then another several years as a math coach. So
Hmm.
I understand, what schools are like, and it's probably even more complex in 2025.
Yeah, and 2026 now.
Yeah. 2026. Oh my God. Yes.
Believe it or not, we're yeah, and another one that I always think about with the creative insubordination too is like when you have teachers are just given too many standards that they're supposed to go through. And so to me, a kind of creative insubordination would be like, I'm gonna kind of skip, quote unquote, skip this one and this one, but it's because I'm gonna go deeper in this one that I think is important and I think my students will benefit from it. And to me, I would be like, more power to you as a teacher to sort of go deeper on the important ones. And maybe
Which
that
then
means
makes
not,
me
yeah.
think about professional development and planning. So again, I feel really blessed that I was able to do vertical planning, fifth grade planning with the sixth grade teacher,
Hmm.
and the seventh grade teacher, as well as, horizontal, right? Me and the other sixth grade teachers. The reason why that is important because, if you know there are particular concepts like area is in kindergarten and area is in calculus, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That helps us to think about, well, maybe this is not an area we can skip, right?
Yeah.
But maybe there's some other type of topic that, you know, we don't necessarily need to hit on as hard. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to make a connection to
Yeah,
what you
yeah.
just
Oh
said
yeah,
about like
it's like
skipping stuff.
right, a central mathematical idea where it's kind of like we want our students to have deep understanding of this.
Right,
And it's central to mathematics all the way up, which means
right.
like yeah, give them
But
the
again,
but
teachers don't always get the opportunity to do vertical planning together,
right, right.
and thinking about scope and sequence vertically. And I'm talking about together in the same room. I've had that experience and it is so wonderful.
Hmm.
Unpacking the standards together, thinking about this together is amazing.
And it might be nice if a sixth grader teacher is kind of thinking, I sort of want to skip this one. It seems kind of on the periphery. It's not usually on the state tests or whatever. And if a seventh grade teacher says, "Yeah, go ahead and skip it," I don't really care. That kind of gives you more empowerment to for that little creative inspiration.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There might be some administrators that are not liking us right now, but I'm just being real. Like,
That's
I think
right.
we have too many standards. So,
We sure do.
all right. So we've been talking about teachers and you've shared some advice. I appreciate that. What about for researchers who are listening? Is there something that the research community that you hope they take away from the urban education article?
Yeah, I would love for researchers to do more research on Black girls. So there's just not enough. There's just not enough research on Black girls. So I would love for folks to do more mixed methods, quantitative stuff, any kind of study that will give us more insight into what they need, what they experience. I know you didn't ask me about this, but the latest project, I have papers that are about to come out, is I developed my own assessment of math identity, co-designed with adolescent Black girls ages 8 through 13. So I did that because my smaller qualitative studies were saying, okay, this is the intersectional process. This is what we need. But I was like, all right, well, I need a whole bunch of Black girls to, take this assessment. And I need to see if this is like something that is real big nationally or whatever, or is it just my studies? And so, to make a long story short, I developed that assessment. It's called Make Me, and it has a math identity score. It has what I've called intersectionality assets score and intersectionality barrier score. And we sat down and did cognitive interviews with Black girls. They took the assessment. They really did co-design this assessment measure with us. And so that is going to give me an opportunity to hopefully work with school districts, once everything is published, to be able to use this assessment to help them really see how to better support Black girls. So, for example, if the score is showing higher barriers, then we plan to, develop professional development around like how do you address the barriers, for example. So that's really exciting work for me because it's sort of trying to take the next level. Because honestly, Sam, I hope to one day stand and have conversations with legislators and policymakers because these things need to change. And by the way I designed it, any student can take the measure.
Mm.
Okay. We've branched it so that if you're a Black girl, you just go a different route, but anyone can take it.
Mm-hmm.
The math identity reliability scores were very, very strong. And so even if a district just wanted to use the math identity part,
Mm-hmm.
they could. But anyway, that's where I'm trying to go.
You're building things and putting them in place to try to make a sort of a legislative push or a policy push down the
Yeah.
road. Yeah.
And so the more research we have that I can utilize
Mm.
to couple with my own work, I just think that's going to be more helpful. And so, quantitative research done well and done intersectionally, bring it on. Like we need that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking about my audience. Like policymakers want scales, like,
Hmm.
right? They want scaling programs. They want to see larger numbers. And so other researchers that if that is your zhuzh, quantitative research, yeah, we need it.
All right, great. Well, a lot going on. You have a lot of work out in front of you, but I always like to end by asking actually if you put all that math ed stuff aside. And if you didn't have to do any of that math ed stuff, and if you weren't even in the field, is there something you can imagine for yourself as an alternative career?
Oh my God, it's still teaching.
Uh,
I would literally have my days filled with going to elementary schools
hmm?
and doing math with little kids all day. That's literally as a volunteer and as like a community
Gotcha.
member, not as like a
Okay, so
teacher.
you could start like a after school math club and just have like anybody that wants to come and stay and do.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll just have all the manipulatives because you're asking me to freedom dream.
Okay, I thought it was worksheets. I thought you were gonna.
You know what, Sam? You something wrong for that. No, I'm gonna freedom dream. It's gonna be fun. I'm gonna have all of the manipulatives because I can afford. We're dreaming now, audience. I
Hmm.
could afford all of the technology and just I love manipulatives and some of the basic stuff a lot of kids don't even have access to.
Yeah.
A lot of using words, numbers, pictures, technology, reading literature about math. Yeah, inviting their friends, cousins to, talk about math. I just wanted to be a family
Yeah,
sort
and a
of
lot of
thing.
the young kids, they still like math. It hasn't been beat out of them yet. Like they're like, "Oh, that is cool." And they like want to explore ideas and stuff,
Yeah,
patterns.
yeah, yeah. But also to see Black girls see someone that looks like them that is also
Yeah.
really into math and enjoying math and showing like the power of this magnificent tool
Yeah.
that can really help you, not just do what you need to do on your homework, but really understand your life and plan your birthday party and like do all kinds of stuff. Math is amazing. So that's what I would do. And then when I was done with the elementary school, I would pamper myself with massages, spas, and facial.
That'd be the weekends. The weekends with that stuff and then during the weekdays after school.
I feel like I was born to be an educator, which is why I said if I don't earn tenure at Vanderbilt, I already know I'm going back to the classroom. I had a very good career. That doesn't mean that everything was perfect, that I didn't have hard days, but I just love other people's kids. Being with students and, talking about life and math. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and setting that example that can
it's
actually
a good
reverberate
example.
in a long way. Yeah, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, joy. We want joy in math, Sam.
Hmm. Well, that's wonderful. Well, for an article that can be kind of heavy at times and has harm right in the title,
Yeah,
I did really enjoy talking to you about it, and you did find that joy and bring it out from the girls and gave some positive energy to it. So I appreciate
thank
your time.
you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sam.